What's going on, everybody? My name is Drew and Alex Draw Cartoons, and welcome back to another drawing and ranking video. Now, if you didn't watch my first drawing and ranking video, it is exactly that. It's going to be a series where I am going to be drawing and ranking a certain topic of things that I just enjoy talking about. If you didn't see my last drawing and ranking video where I drew and ranked the top 5 moves of 2024 so far in my opinion that I've seen, well, we are back with another one where I will be drawing and ranking the top 5 NBA players of all time in my opinion. Now, I don't talk about basketball a lot on my platforms, but I do love basketball so much. It's my favorite sport by far. Love watching basketball, love watching the NBA, college basketball, all of that. So I'm very excited for this video, very excited to talk about this. Before I dive in with all of these videos I'll be making where I'll be drawing and ranking, these are all my opinion. You are very much allowed to have your own opinion, but please be respectful about it. Be respectful in the comments, and I would very much love to hear what your top 5 NBA players of all time as well. And one more thing before I do dive into the ranking, a few things I do look at when I look at a certain player trying to measure their greatness are their individual accolades, individual stats, and the overall impact that they had on the game. So those are just a few bullet points to look at. There are obviously a whole other list of intangibles that you can look at, but those are probably the main 3 that I'll be looking at here and talking about when talking about how I rank these players. And diving into the rankings, at the number 5 spot, I have the Big Dipper himself, Wilt Chamberlain. So some of you may disagree with me on this one just because of the time that he did play in, but his overall dominance and the numbers that he did put up cannot be overlooked and overshadowed. I think that he definitely deserves to be in this conversation as one of the best players of all time because of the numbers that he puts up, because of his impact on the game. He was someone who they had to adjust the rules of the game for because of him. He is someone who had a huge impact on the game, and then again is another thing you can just simply not overlook. He scored 100 points in a game, for God's sakes. Whether you believe it happened or not, because there's no game footage or whatever, it happened. There's a box score, there's witnesses, it happened. It's an incredible achievement that you just can't simply not take into account when looking at some of the best players ever. And his numbers still hold up today, all of these years later after he retired in the early to mid 70s. He still is in the top 10 all-time in total points for his career and is still the #1 leading rebounder in NBA history. That is insane considering the fact that he played in the 60s and the 70s, that his numbers are still valid today and still in the conversation as some of the best ever. And even though Wilt Chamberlain didn't win the most NBA championships, he did still end up winning 2. And even though he doesn't have the rings to match up, that doesn't undermine his overall individual success that he had as a player. Now for the drawing, obviously you can't talk about Wilt Chamberlain without talking about the 100-point game. So the main inspiration for this drawing was just going off of the 100-point game iconic photo of him holding up the piece of paper that says 100 that people still use as inspiration for photos today. If someone drops 70 points in a game, they're going to be holding a piece of paper that says 70 on it. That is still something that is still very prevalent in basketball culture, which is so insane all of these years later. So here's the finished product here. Wilt Chamberlain, my number 5 greatest player of all time. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we have Magic Johnson himself. The greatest point guard of all time, one of the greatest passers of all time, one of the more revolutionary players in NBA history in terms of the popularity to the NBA and the style of basketball today. He is someone who really brought an extra flair to the game and just made basketball basically what it is today. He's another player who had so much impact on the game in NBA history and is still just a prevalent figure in the game in his flair and in his no-look passes. And obviously he has all of that, but he also has the achievements. He has 2 MVPs. He has 3 finals MVPs. He has 5 NBA championships. He is clearly one of the greatest players of all time and one of the best passers of all time. So Magic being at the number 4 spot makes so much sense to me. He is easily a top 5 player of all time in my opinion. So with this drawing, I just looked up Magic Johnson, found a picture of him with that $1 million smile of his, went off of that, and then here's the finished product of Magic Johnson, the 4th greatest player of all time in my opinion. And we are now at the number 3 spot, and at the number 3 spot I have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the captain himself, the king of the skyhook, one of the greatest players of all time, the greatest center of all time in my opinion, because his whole body of work cannot be understated in how incredible he is and how sometimes he's not the most talked about player of all time just because he's not super expressive. He typically kept to himself for the most part, but he is such an incredible player. His stats and his accolades combined make him to be in this conversation as one of the greatest players of all time. 6 rings, 2 finals MVPs, 6 regular season MVPs, the most by any player ever. the second most points in NBA history, and he had the record as the highest scoring player of all time for such a long time, until recently, obviously. And then his defense, his rebound numbers, his whole career is dang near perfect. It is so good. And outside of that, he also was very much an advocate for civil rights and equal rights and stuff like that outside of the game, which is another thing that is such an incredible thing to do with a platform that you have like that when you are a top player like Kareem is. So yeah, number 3 spot for Kareem, and now onto the drawing. I wanted to make sure I found a photo to work off of that had Kareem in his goggles. I love the look of Kareem with his goggles in the Lakers uniform. I think it's just such an iconic look. So I went off of that, and then here is the drawing of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the 3rd greatest player of all time. We are now to the top two NBA players of all time. It's pretty obvious who are going to be in those 2 spots, but how are they going to end up? We'll have to find out in a second, because here are a few honorable mentions of players that I think were just barely missed this top 5. Those players definitely include players like Shaquille O'Neal, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, and even Steph Curry. Steph Curry is definitely starting to make a case for himself to be in this conversation. He's just outside my top 10, I think. Oh, and Bill Russell as well. I completely forgot about Bill Russell. He needs to be in this conversation as well. 11 rings, civil rights advocate as well. So many great players with so many great resumes. It's hard to narrow it down to 5. Those are just a few that you may be wondering why they're not in this top 5, but just know they are just outside the top 5. Now here we are at the number 2 spot, who I believe is the 2nd greatest player of all time, and that is Air Jordan himself, Michael Jordan. Now, me putting him at 2 is not a knock against his career. Michael Jordan's career is superb. It is spectacular. 6 rings, 6 finals MVPs, 5 regular season MVPs, 2 dunk contest titles, endless amounts of scoring titles, defensive player of the years, and to a lot of people, he is the greatest player of all time. And it is very warranted that he is in this conversation, of course, and is a universal brand, not just a name, not just a household name. His name himself is a brand. He is such an incredible player, and his popularity skyrocketed the NBA into the worldwide name and brand that it is today. Everyone wanted to be like Mike in the 90s, and he was a one-of-a-kind player, one-of-a-kind competitor, and one of the greatest sports icons ever, for sure. So the number 2 spot, Michael Jordan. With this drawing, just want to go with a basic photo of Michael. I want to find a photo of him smiling. That can be kind of hard to find because when he's on the court, he is very competitive and very locked in, but I want to find a nice photo of him to work off of. And here's the finished product of Michael Jordan, Air Jordan himself, the 2nd greatest player of all time, in my opinion. And I can already hear you guys typing in the comments about why I'm so wrong about this, but in my eyes, there's nobody else that you can pick as the greatest player of all time than LeBron James. He is easily the greatest player in the history of basketball, has one of the greatest overall stories and careers in the history of sports. Over 40,000 career points, over 11,000 rebounds, over 11,000 assists, the only player to have 40, 10, and 10, and no one even has more than like 28, 7K, and 7K. It is insane. His overall stats are better than anybody. And when you look at that and can't say that he is the greatest player of all time, that's on you at that point. And like I said at the beginning, another thing to look at is his impact on the game and the legacy that he has left. He was the face of the league for 20 years now, and he's going to be leaving the game at a better place than it was in the beginning when he started, when he was drafted. One of the biggest knocks that someone may have against his career is when he left Cleveland to Miami. But that choice that he made in 2010 left an impact on players after, because it gave players the opportunity to choose where they wanted to play. Because obviously before that, every star player was with that one team their entire career, even if it would have hindered their career and their accolades and their chances to win championships. That is an incredible impact that LeBron made by making that decision, and then all other players after him now have that same choice to make the choice of where they want to play, who they want to play for. And obviously, outside of all the amazing things he did on the court, he did a lot of amazing things off the court. A lot of incredible charitable donations, creating a school for inner city children just like himself to make sure that they can potentially grow up and potentially change the trajectory of countless child's lives because of him using his platform for good. I could talk about LeBron James and why he's the greatest player of all time for hours, but I'm just going to leave it there. If you guys disagree with me, that's okay. You're allowed to have your own opinion on this. My opinion is just that LeBron is the greatest player of all time. And I think the fact that he has the incredible longevity to be able to play in the same league, on the same team with his son, is another thing that you just can't overlook. His longevity cannot be understated in how incredible he is. 20 years later, still one of the top players in the league, and he's still going, and he's still writing his own story. And in my head, it's just going to make his legacy and his whole resume as the greatest player of all time even better and more of a lock that he is the number one spot. So anyway, enough rambling for me, onto the drawing. With this one, I wanted to pick one from 2016, which I think was really one of the moments that cemented LeBron as one of the greatest players, certainly into that GOAT conversation with Jordan. So I wanted to pick a photo from 2016, especially him in the black sleeve jerseys. I just love those jerseys so much. The sleeve jersey era in the NBA was a crazy time. Some of them were terrible, but some of them were iconic, like the black sleeve jersey from the Cavs. So here's the finished product here. King James, LeBron James, greatest player of all time. So there you have it, the top 5 NBA players in NBA history, in my opinion: Wilt Chamberlain, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James. Please let me know what you guys think about my rankings in the comments. Let me know what your basketball ranking is, top 5, top 10, anything like that. I would love to hear in the comments. Let's all be respectful. Let's not be mean to each other. We're just talking about a sport here. We're talking about basketball. Nothing to be calling people out, calling people names for, or anything like that. So again, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you guys want to see more drawing and ranking videos, what you might want to see in those drawing and ranking videos, what other stuff you want to see from me in the future. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Check me out on Instagram and TikTok at DUUpArt. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and keep on drawing.